Hi, my name is Sean Berry and I work for BMC. I work in the Secure Operations Group. Today I'd like to talk to you about our new response service offering. We're taking a cloud-based approach to address the complexity of managing security vulnerabilities in a cloud and on-premise environment. Our operations groups are under great pressure to respond to vulnerabilities in an automated manner, prioritizing the most critical vulnerabilities first. SecOps Response Service integrates scan data from the three most popular vulnerability scanners with two of the most popular automation systems, BMC Server Automation and Microsoft System Center Configuration Manager. This matters because more than 80% of attacks target known vulnerabilities, and 99.9% of them, almost all of them, have patches already available for those exploits. If you can patch your systems faster and ahead of the known vulnerabilities, you stand a better chance of staying ahead of the hackers. So what's that mean in the product? Here we have the SecOps Response Service, which uses a web interface and is based entirely in the cloud. This service uses connectors, which are downloaded and run in your environment to talk to both the managed system and to the cloud-based service. So let's look briefly at talking to BladeLogic and also to SCCM. As we log in, our credentials are passed through the connector to BladeLogic to do authentication. So Qualys, Nessus, and Rapid7 all provide vulnerability scans, which provide a lot of good vulnerability information, but which is relatively hard for our IT ops team to do something productive with. So what can we do with this? We can load it into SecOps Response. We can grab a scan file, import it in with the option to filter in or out particular severities. Some organizations want to focus on particular vulnerabilities, others on particular severities, depending on the week or what's going on. So here's the next thing to do. SecOps Response, talking to your automation systems, knows what hosts are in your environment and can map the systems identified in the scans to the host names as they're known by in the automation or configuration management system. This, of course, happens in an automated fashion. So once we know which hosts in our automation and configuration systems map to the vulnerability scans, now we can go decide what to do with the vulnerabilities. Since both SCCM and BladeLogic know how to address patches, we can automatically map discovered vulnerabilities to the patches that are available within these solutions. So we're logged in and looking at BladeLogic information, and for this particular vulnerability, it happens to be CVE-2010-3332, which means it came out about 7 years ago. It's mapped to the patches in our patch catalogs. So we're logged in and looking at BladeLogic information, and for this particular vulnerability, which happens to be CVE 2010-3332, that means it came out about 7 years ago, and it's mapped to patches in our patch catalog. We can look through the list and see where other vulnerabilities are mapped as well. Now, it's very important to note that not every vulnerability can be remediated via a patch. Some require configuration changes or a package to be deployed, like the easier-to-exploit JBoss and open-source database vulnerabilities. SecOps Response can help us with those. We can map in remediation scripts that we build that will help us close these types of vulnerabilities. Okay, so next step. Once we have all this data, how do we put it to work for us? SecOps Response provides two different views of the same data, a security dashboard and an operator dashboard, satisfying two different roles. The security team is focused on vulnerabilities and wants to see the burn down and current state of the efforts to apply patches, scripts, and packages to remediate those vulnerabilities, while operations will go out and do the work of setting up, getting approval for, and executing the remediations. So I have these two different views. I have a view into the vulnerability status, the average number of days it takes us to address a vulnerability, and whether it's within SLA. Green is within SLA, yellow is approaching, while red is out of the SLA. I also have the average number of days for a vulnerability to get scheduled, approved, get executed, and average number of days to close. On average, as we can see here, it takes us about 21 days to close once a vulnerability comes in. As we know, our IT operations group is pretty busy. Once they identify a vulnerability and decide they want to do something about it, usually takes about 7 days to get approval once the remediation is created. Then it'll take about 14 days, not too surprising, to get to a maintenance window to execute the remediation. And overall, it takes us about 38 days to close a vulnerability end to end. So overall, it takes a few days, but it's good to see consistent turnaround and burn down on vulnerabilities. We can also identify any particular CVE. So if we have a particular vulnerability we're paying a lot of attention to, perhaps it's a 0-day or clear and present danger patch that we want particularly to address, we can identify it here. Click Apply Filters, and we'll just see the data for that one vulnerability. Or of course, we can go look at it at a higher level as well. Let's clear the list of vulnerabilities and go back to the fuller view. Now on the bottom, we're seeing overall is basically a stacked graph. The bottom graph shows the list of vulnerabilities awaiting attention, waiting for IT to figure out what to do with them. Yellow is vulnerabilities in an awaiting approval state. Those in light blue have been scheduled and are pending execution or when the next maintenance window arrives. And dark blue shows vulnerabilities that have been closed. We'll also see the burn down or trend rate that'll predict the rate it takes them to get all closed out if we keep working at the same rate. Okay, so now let's go look at the operator's dashboard. In the operator's dashboard, there are some particular things that we want to look at. We have all of the same filters. We can identify individual vulnerabilities by CVE. We can filter by a specific operating system. Perhaps we just want to go look at the sub-5s. Do we want to use an existing server smart group? Maybe just the cloud-based servers, Amazon and Azure. We can look for the vulnerabilities that are approaching SLA and identify the level of risk there, or identify the level of progress. Of course, with our integration with BMC Discovery, we can filter servers by installed software packages. Maybe we want to target software on IIS or SQL Server. Selecting those particular software packages and just filtering by those. So let's look on the left and talk real briefly about assets. There are 38 assets known in our scans that also map to targets and known hosts on BladeLogic. There are 12 servers in our vulnerability scans that we have not yet mapped to particular BSA resources. They may not have agents on them or aren't enrolled, who knows, but we know about the vulnerabilities, we just don't know how to fix them yet. The thing that we really worry about, though, the blind spot, is these 16 targets known to Discovery but have not yet been examined by our vulnerability scanner. This is literally the blind spot. These are the servers that might be secure. They might have most of the vulnerabilities on them addressed, but maybe they're not as secure as we'd like them to be. These are the hosts that we don't know about, and they're the ones that keep me up at night. So of our vulnerabilities, roughly 1,500 total, most of them are mapped to remediations of one sort or another. There's only 169 unmapped vulnerabilities that we don't know how to fix, that don't have a package, a script, or a patch associated with them for remediation. Most of the vulnerabilities in this environment we have a way to fix. So how do we do that? Let's go find just our sub-5s. Let's see how many vulnerabilities that gives us. Still a few. About 250. Next, let's filter down all the servers by OS. So here's my vulnerabilities, and here are the mapped fixes for them. So a good little host list. Alright, so let's start remediation. I want to remediate these sub-5 vulnerabilities in production, and the description shows all sub-5s in the all servers group. Next, I want to see my list of vulnerabilities, and if I only want to go after a particular subset of them, I'll be able to individually select in or out hosts and specific patches. So now we can schedule our particular activity even using execute now. We look and see that these will be remediated using Windows patching jobs, which is very straightforward. We can also do some notifications. Once my job completes, I'll send out a notification to my end user, myself, etc. I've got some jobs that have already run, and we can see these jobs created. And there are portal operations. So that's most everything for BladeLogic. Now the security team will get good feedback about these operations activities I've just done. They'll get instant visibility into these activities as soon as I schedule them on the operations side. So let's go do the exact same thing, except for SCCM. So here we go, and we're authenticating. We need our tenant domain name, and then an Active Directory account. At some point, we'll be integrating into a shared single sign-on solution, but for the moment, we pass through credentials to a specific SCCM and AD environment. I'm logging in using an AD credential for Alan ADM, a dedicated administrator account for me, that will pass through to Active Directory on the connected system. All of the workflow is essentially the same. The scans get imported, the assets get mapped, although in this case we'll be mapping to host names as they are known to SCCM. Note the capital letters. Once mapped, we're going to identify vulnerabilities instead of by CVE, but by Microsoft Bulletin number. Microsoft Bulletins are straightforward, but more commonly used by Windows administrators than perhaps CVEs. So as you can see, all of these bulletins are mapped over to Microsoft patches as provided by SCCM and software update services. This comes back into the same security dashboard, except instead of the CVEs, we see Microsoft bulletins. And we're going to see the vulnerabilities closing down at a similar rate. We have a few vulnerabilities outside of our SLAs, which we'll want to pay attention to. But we can use our AWS and Azure device collection, similar to the group of the same name on the BSA side, just like we would use server groups or smart groups. The security group maps to an equivalent Active Directory group with SCCM privileges. So the operations dashboard looks the same as well. Filter by device collection, bulletin ID. Scroll down, and here are all of the software updates for us. So let's click Remediate. Let's call the job Remediate Sub 5 MS Bulletins. Easy to go through here. And identify some hosts and patches we want to do remediation on. What distribution point we want to go to. And how are we going to do notifications as well. So I want to go ahead and execute that software update now. Go hit those Sub 5 bulletins. I'm going to click Finish, and I'm going to see the operation created in the Operations panel. So everything comes into the same security and operator dashboards, giving us the same visibility into the remediation of these vulnerabilities. So that's it at a very high level. It's a solution that lets you identify and prioritize your most critical vulnerabilities and go after them first. We talked to a number of customers who say they can't keep up with the rate of vulnerabilities they need to be able to close with the operational tempo of getting those patches out there. Rather than seeing people face challenges on this front, we want them to be able to close their most critical vulnerabilities first, so that they don't end up in the newspaper or on the front page of the New York Times. So that's about it. My name is Sean Berry, and I work for BMC. Thank you for your time, and don't be afraid to reach out if we can help you in any way.